This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellow Wall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 494 of the Yellow Wall Pod, and Happy New Year. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about a little bit how the first half of the season under Nuri Sahin went, what moves Borussia Dortmund should make during the winter transfer period, and I guess we'll look a little bit ahead to what expects us in 2025, and of course Friday's game against Bayer Leverkusen. At home for all that and more joins me Matthias. Hello Matthias. Have you managed to slide into 2025 well?
Well, I started 2025 like I ended 2024 with a cold. So far the same, but obviously hoping for a better year.
Also here with us again, Lars Perlman. Hello Lars, how are you doing?
Hello Stefan, I'm fine, thank you.
So, yeah, this is going to be a bit of a hard transition, but unfortunately 2025 from a Dortmund perspective really didn't start well because it started with the sad news of Teddy the Bear's passing at the, I guess we can say, young age of 60 years old. I mean, he was mostly active before my time, although I think I got to see him play a few times when he was a reserve goalkeeper, but of course he was in goal for Dortmund's cup win in 1989 and on the roster for the championships in 1995-96 and of course also for the Champions League win in 1997. But as regular listeners plural I hope know that one of my favorite players ever is of course Stefan Klose, who took Teddy the Bear's spot when Ottmar Hitzfeld came on. But nevertheless, I think it's safe to say that Teddy the Bear has become one of the most integral or well-known faces around Borussia Dortmund. Some call him a club legend. For sure is that he has become one of the faces of the club, be it as a goalkeeper coach or as a fan liaison later. He was a very down-to-earth guy and extremely approachable, and I think speaks to the fact that I've seen so many people on X, what it's called now, post their pictures, whether it be local or international fans, that they took with Teddy the Bear. And he was just a guy always around the club. I got to talk to him a little bit when I was still working for ESPN here and there, just because you sort of cross paths, whether it's on the training ground or somewhere in the mixed zone. Exchange some words. Like I said, he is very approachable and just a very, very decent guy. And his passing is, of course, extremely sad. Matthias, since you are the most veteran among us, I think you have probably seen him in his active time playing for Borussia Dortmund the most. What are your memories of Teddy the Bear?
Well, I mean, the most iconic moment, of course, is that he was in goal for Dortmund when they won the cup in 1989, which was kind of like the greatest highlight for the club for the longest time, because there really hadn't been anything since the 60s. And we didn't know at that point yet the great things that were coming just a few years down the line. He was not a great keeper. He didn't play for Germany. I wouldn't call him a club legend. I would call him a club icon, because
That's
for
fair.
me, a club legend, especially when you look at the long list of truly legendary keepers that Dortmund has had, both for Germany and other nations, he doesn't quite fit into that status. But iconic, everybody part of that 1989 Cup win. It's like Nobby Dickel. Nobby Dickel is also a club icon, but he wasn't one of the greatest players Dortmund has ever had. So also the many years of being a goalkeeping coach, which I would say he was probably more successful as a goalkeeping coach than as a goalkeeper. And just always kind of being there. I mean, you really couldn't imagine Borussia Dortmund in our lifetimes without Teddy de Beer. And that he's now no longer with us is obviously very, very sad.
Yeah, for sure. It really came out of the blue, obviously, and our condolences to Teddy's family. I'm sure that was not easy at all, and of course, the whole BVB family is just very sad. And I assume we will have a moment of silence at the next home game, and I don't know if there's going to be a choreo since it's very short term. But I think there's going to be an outpour of something toward Teddy the Bear and an appreciation of who he was. Now, unfortunately, I have to segue a little bit to the first half of the season. Lars, Dortmund have spent Christmas and New Year's in 6th place, 11 points off the lead. They're level on points with the likes of Mainz and Werder Bremen right now with 25 after 15 match days. First 15 games in the Bundesliga under Nuri Sahin. I think we both have been relatively critical when he was appointed as a manager, just because it did not feel, at least to me, like a meritocracy at the time. Now that we have a little bit of evidence, let's say, and a little bit of sample size to play with, in general, what is your take on that appointment, looking back now after taking over from Edin Terzic?
I mean, I have to be somewhat careful not to say something which will bite me later, but I think...
Never happened before on this podcast.
No, because nobody remembers the stupid things we say. I mean, I think it's fairly hard to argue with the idea that maybe this job was too much too soon for him, because obviously he was the manager of sorts at Antalyaspor, but that's not a level that's representative of anything. And I think I said at the time when they appointed him, like, it felt like they were scared of losing him, but what are you losing exactly? Like, you're losing an assistant coach who has a good mind for football, but he's like 36 years old. So there's all the time in the world for him to come back from, let's say, a stint in the Netherlands or wherever he might have been of interest for some clubs. So I didn't really understand the urgency at that point in time to not have a real coaching search, to just appoint the assistant coach. Once again, not really having an open-minded, coaching search, which the last time they had one, I think led them to Lucien Favre, and maybe there's something to be said for, always staying in-house, so to say, outside of Marco Rose over the last few years. The coaching appointments, twice Terzic, now Schein. The sporting director is Sebastian Kehl, the CEO of sports, Lars Ricken. I don't know if there's enough of an exchange of ideas, enough of an influx from outside influences, which I think is fairly obviously proven in sports to be beneficial to a certain extent. So I think those are like my macro level views. I think if we look a bit more intricately, there's certainly some growing pains as to be expected with a young head coach, whether he's from inside or the outside. So it's not like Vincent Kompany hasn't had some level of growing pains at Bayern Munich, even if not on the same level. But then again, it's also down to his squad being much better, much deeper than what Nuri Sahin had to work with at Dortmund. Because obviously, when we are looking at the first half of this season in particular, there's no debating the level of, I don't know, bad luck, or just, injuries, illnesses, whatever. When there's multiple games doing a stretch run in autumn where one or two full professionals are on the bench and the rest is players coming up from the under 23s or even under 19s. I mean, there's only so much you can say about, for example, the cup exit in Wolfsburg when looked at in those circumstances, because, I mean, they were playing with, at the end, like 9 or 10 real professional players, and they were eliminated a minute from going to penalties away to, not a great side, obviously, in Wolfsburg, but a decent Bundesliga side, which obviously makes it a fairly tough draw in the cup. So the cup exit would usually be more of a point of anger for me, because obviously the cup is the only realistic trophy option every year for Dortmund. And then you have to differentiate between the Bundesliga and the Champions League, because the Champions League performances and results have been very good. The annoying defeat against Barcelona notwithstanding, I think if ahead of the league phase, we pretty much said, yeah, they're probably going to lose against Real Madrid and Barcelona, and then see if from the other 6 games they will get enough points. And to me, it looks like that, because they are now playing, I think, at Bologna and against Donetsk in the final 2 games. So I would expect them to make it into the round of 16, which would be a fairly decent result, because obviously you elude 2 extra games. So the Champions League is probably the high point of the season so far, but there's no denying that the Bundesliga performance has been seriously underwhelming, especially considering that the schedule makers actually were quite nice to Dortmund in the first half of the season, because as we talked about, I think at some point in late November or maybe this December, they've played almost every good team at home already. I think the hardest away fixture so far was Stuttgart, which they were probably battered 5-1, but that also means that in the second half of the season, they play, obviously now at home against Leverkusen, but they travel to Leverkusen on the penultimate match day. They travel to Bayern Munich. They travel to RB Leipzig. They play in Frankfurt, like a week from now, it feels like. So, if they don't get their act together more seriously, even than in the last few years, when it seems like they always were better after the winter break than before, and I think the points prove that as well. If they don't have the same kind of jump, then for the first time in a long time, Champions League qualification is in real jeopardy. And seeing as you asked me about Schein initially, if they don't make it into the Champions League under his leadership, then he's a failure as a head coach, because that's the absolute minimum that you can expect from Dortmund, given what they spend every year, even in context to Leipzig, Leverkusen, but also Frankfurt and I don't know, Mainz. If Mainz are serious contenders for that stuff this year, so be it. Top 4 is an absolute requirement at Dortmund, and any coach who misses out on that probably isn't good enough.
Yeah, I mean, Dortmund only made the Champions League this season, if you will, because of a new regulation, because otherwise, as they finished 5th last season, they would have also missed out on it. Matthias last just talked about the jump that Dortmund usually make in the second half of the season. I think Ronach actually made some nice research on that in the season under Favre, for example, in 2021, you had an average in the first half of the season of 1.7 points, and then it jumped to 2 points on average, and now the season after was 1.7 and jumped up to 2.4 in the second half of the season, and in 2023-24 it was also from 1.7 to a straight 2-point average. So my question is, considering that the winter break, if you even want to call it that, was relatively short, there is no training camp or anything that usually is there somewhere in Marbella or wherever they go. Do you think it is realistic that Dortmund will have a similar jump? Because I think it was Lars Ricken who made the math himself and said that basically Dortmund in the second half of the season need to average again somewhere around 2 or above to reach their goals. Just looking at how things have gone and how things you project will go, do you think Dortmund will make a top 4 finish when everything is said and done?
Well, I mean, I don't know about if they're going to replicate exactly what they've done in the last few seasons, because I think I've made my opinion on Nuri Sahin relatively well known. And I just don't have the confidence in him. That being said, they're only 2 points off third. Granted, they're only 2 points off 10th. It's incredibly tight Bundesliga if you're looking from like third to 10th or within 4 points. That's a really, really tight.
The mediocre mid-pack, let's call it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got some clear overperformers like Mainz and Bremen. And some underperformers, which right now I'd actually put Leipzig in as an underperformer at 4th. Stuttgart as well. Yeah, I mean, Freiburg, kind of, I figured it would be where they are, but they're still right in there. Only a point behind Dortmund. So, could they finish in the top 4? Yes. Will they finish? I have absolutely no idea. I mean, I have very little confidence going in the second half of the season, unlike even seasons before under Terzic and so on, where I'm like, I think in the second half of the season they can turn it around. Given that it as close as it is, the key thing will be Dortmund need to pick up points away from home. I mean, at home, they've done really, really well. Now, granted, they're going to have the biggest home test really coming up this Friday when they host Bayer Leverkusen, which I don't think they're going to win. But, they kind of ended the season with a win, even though ended the season, before the winter break, even though we can all agree that was a great first half and a second half that we were happy to see over and done with. I think they'll somehow squeak and push into the top 4 because I don't really have a ton of confidence in Frankfurt. Right now, I think Mainz will drop away, Bremen below, Dortmund will drop away, Gladbach, who knows. So, yeah, I think top 4 finish is definitely in the cards for Dortmund. If I throw an eye on transfers, all the talk is about Daniel Mahlen leaving. I don't know that I'm a fan of that, to be perfectly honest. So I guess we'll wait and see. But I think as things stand, Dortmund could finish in the top 4 just because, like you said, it's a very tight, I'm not going to say mediocre pack, but it's very tight right now. And a couple of wins in a row, and depending on how things go for the other teams, Dortmund could be third with a cushion in a few weeks.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I mean, the games against Leverkusen, Kiel, and Frankfurt obviously crucial. Really hope that Dortmund will pick up their second Bundesliga win of the season away from home in Kiel. That would be just amazing. Last but similar question to you. If you sort of look at or project a little bit, what are your sort of expectations going into this second half of the season? I don't know if you want to also talk about the transfers that Dortmund made over the summer and sort of give them a mid-season review. I'm somewhere where Matthias is. I really don't know if Dortmund are going to have the mettle to break into the top 4. It is certainly not unrealistic for them to do so, but there needs to be a lot of improvement. Do you think that a lot of it just simply comes down to health, or do you think that maybe Dortmund will have a better second half of the season? If so, because Nuri Sahin has already made some colossal errors that he will unlikely repeat.
I mean, those were 5 questions in one.
Yes.
And Stefan Butzko special. I mean, I'm famously not the most optimistic one, even on this panel, where usually we're all varying degrees of pessimistic. I would agree with Matthias's assessment, just from a personal perspective, I don't have too much confidence in this current setup. But I also think that, the opposition, which I think mainly is Frankfurt and Stuttgart and Leipzig, because obviously Bayern and Leverkusen are a class apart, and then I would also expect the surprise packages to fall away a little bit over the course of the remainder of the season, just because, they don't have the substance in the squad and all that. Given that, I think Frankfurt have ridden a bit of a purple patch from Mamouche and Ekitike, and that has already waned a little bit towards the end of last year. I think it's mostly going to come down to Dortmund, Leipzig, and Stuttgart battling it out for 2 spots. And then, the odds are in Dortmund's favor because, you only have to beat one of them. And obviously, Leipzig have the opportunity to rest because they are not going to be in the Champions League going forward after those 2 final match days. And there's no relegation to the Europa League this season, which for them is probably a blessing this year because they don't seem to have the substance to play well in 3 competitions. Stuttgart might make it to the knockout stages of the Champions League, which I don't know if that's necessarily positive for them. They are also still in the cup, so I think from a Dortmund perspective, you probably hope that Stuttgart gain enough points against, I think, Bratislava and Paris Saint-Germain to make it into the next round of the Champions League, just because they haven't played in that competition for, 14, 15 years. Most of their players don't know the competition, so everything or anything that makes it tougher on Stuttgart is good for Dortmund. So even though I'm pessimistic and not necessarily too trusting of Dortmund's current setup, I think I would probably say it's more likely that they make it into the top 4. But maybe segueing a bit into the half-season review that you mentioned for the new signings in the summer. They definitely need more from basically everyone. Even Girassi, whom I've been very positive about, and I think we've probably all been quite impressed by. He missed quite a few chances towards the end of the year. Late in games, for example, against Gladbach, which could have been 2 points more. He needs to be more clinical because Dortmund have a bit of a problem in creating chances this season. To me, almost the craziest stat is that Dortmund, after 15 match days, have a goal difference of +4, which, that's embarrassing almost for a club of Dortmund's size.
It's +6 though.
And that much better than Stefan. I stand corrected. Then it's no problem at all if it's +6.
Well, every goal counts. If it's +4, Dortmund might be in 11th place right now. Who knows? But no, you're right. It is an abysmal goal differential after 15 match days for a club like Dortmund.
So we need Girassi to be a bit more clinical. We need Maxi Bayer to continue his ascendancy of, the last 4, 6 or whatever weeks, because quite frankly he was pretty out of it upon arrival from Hoffenheim. Maybe Nuri Sahin has figured out how to best use him now, because sticking Maxi Bayer on the wing is just not a great option, and that's the only thing that makes me worry a bit about probably letting Malen go, is that Maxi Bayer might have to play even more on the wing, and that's just not his best position, especially for a club like Dortmund that has a lot of possession in the Bundesliga. Jan Kauto, quite honestly, has been terrible so far. Oft injured, and when coming on, quite often involved in defensive shambles. Pascal Groß started strong, really tailed off. He's suspended for Leverkusen and Kiel. I don't think that necessarily was his mistake against Wolfsburg. I think, if I remember correctly, Emre Can had an Emre Can moment, and then Groß had to basically be a firefighter and didn't have enough water, or however the metaphor works.
Well, he was not enough right back to be a right back, but he was playing right back. So yeah. Who am I missing? Waldemar Anton. Ho hum so far, I would say, roughly within expectations.
Obviously, missing a few games hurt, but I think he came back quite strongly against Wolfsburg. And obviously, with Niklas Süle still being out for the foreseeable future, Anton and Schlotterbeck have a chance to really gel together, which I think is what they expected at the start of the season. Am I missing someone?
No, I think that's it, right? I mean, other than that, I think everyone that joined or rejoined were either on the youth teams or in Gio Reyna's case came back from a loan. But yeah, Gio Reyna was also out for most of the season with injury. Played okay when he played, but not really much of a sample size. So overall, I think if it's not going to be a high rating. It's going to be like a 2 out of 10 at best. Honestly, for his contributions. Granted, he was injured, but it is what it is. Honestly, Lars, you have been, I think, more critical of Daniel Mahlen than I have in the recent seasons. What do you make of him really pushing for an exit now in the winter break? Obviously, there are reports that he is already in agreement with Aston Villa. Dortmund, however, not so much. I think they want to recoup the money they spent on him when they sent 30 million to PSV Eindhoven. And the reports are that Aston Villa are offering 18 million euros instead of 30 million euros. But of course, in parts and stretches, he was really good for Dortmund, and in parts of stretches, he was extremely frustrating. Overall, what do you make of him trying to leave? Do you even think Dortmund are going to manage to, successfully negotiate a transfer? And if so, how do you think he should be replaced versus how do you think he's going to be replaced? Sorry for the 8 million questions in one, but here we are again.
I mean, to be quite honest, I was surprised to see Aston Villa of all clubs, because they've been on the ascendancy over the last few years. Obviously, back in the Champions League this season, beating Bayern, for example. Because honestly, I had thought if Mahlen finally gets the move back to England, where he already played in the Arsenal Academy as a youngster, it would more likely be to one of the lower end of the table sort of clubs, like your Everton desperation by late January, whatever, to get a push for the relegation battle or whatever. So I was surprised to see it being Aston Villa. A good club for him. I can certainly understand why he would be keen on the move. He's been keen on leaving Dortmund for a while now. I just think from a personality standpoint, he's never really fit into the team too much. I think he had some good moments, especially, for example, when Ian Maatsen was there, when he had someone to talk to from the Netherlands. And coincidentally or not, Maatsen's obviously still at Villa as we speak anyway, because I think there were some rumors that Dortmund might push for a swap deal, but that's obviously not happening because Villa paid way too much money for Maatsen just a few short months ago. If from a Dortmund perspective, the thing about Mahlen, which you said it perfectly, basically, we all know he can be an absolutely devastating player when he's on it, like scoring almost at will. I mean, he's never been, an out-and-out goal getter for Dortmund, but I think he's led the team in scoring twice now, almost by default, because they didn't really have great striking options over the last two seasons. But the lack of consistency is just so frustrating. You never really know what you're going to get from Mahlen, and it's no wonder that Shine, who's tried to implement a bit more of a winning culture or whatever, with his persona and what he said in public, that he seems to have clashed with Mahlen the most out of the last few coaches, or all the coaches that Mahlen has been playing under at Dortmund. So I can understand from all sides that they have identified this moment as a good opportunity to part ways somewhat amicably. If the money is right, I would sell Mahlen, even though, as I said before, I worry a bit that they aren't going to really replace him. Rather looking at obviously Adeyemi, who's not been able to play much in the first half of the season, but also Maxi Bayer, which again, that's not his best position. You shouldn't put Maxi Bayer out on the right wing just because you don't have anyone else. So, but I think that's what's going to happen because between Adeyemi, Gittens, Duranville, Bayer, I think they will feel they are okay on the wings because obviously you can also still count Brandt in the pinch, maybe Sabitzer again, maybe even Reina. So that seems like they would be okay with that because from all accounts, they seem to have identified central midfield and left back as more of a position of need, which I guess you can also agree with, especially central midfield, because given that Groß started strongly but really tailed off towards the end of the first half of the season. Emre Can is Emre Can, so in many ways it was Mecha, Brandt and a huge question mark in midfield. So if they can get someone in, I have personally not been aware of the existence of James McAtee until like a week ago, so I'm not going to act like I know what he's all about, but they seem to like him and rate him, and basically everyone who's been educated football-wise by Manchester City has turned out to be a decent player over the last few years, so maybe that's something.
Like young Kuto. Although I don't know if he's actually been educated there or...
Firstly, he wasn't, and secondly, I'm still a believer in Jan Koto's potential. He's just not been able to show anything at Dortmund so far. And at left back, I think Rami Bensebaini is probably next to Mecha the most positive story about Dortmund's season so far. So I wouldn't necessarily look to upgrade, the starting spot in the lineup, but obviously they went into the season with Bensebaini and Riasson and I don't know who else. I mean, Couto obviously, but he's not been able to play much. And then they left the space for Almugira Kaba, but outside of getting sent off on his debut, I think he didn't do anything so far to suggest he's ready for professional football. And Riasson has had quite a few issues, like also strange circulation issues, and maybe that's a sign that he's just played too much over the last few months, because obviously he's also regular at Norway and he's always going balls to the wall. Like, I don't think Riasson has ever shied away from a duel or from a sprint during a game, and maybe that shows. So I can understand why left back is also a position of need in the eyes of Dortmund's higher ups. But I personally would rather sign a central midfielder and maybe a Malen replacement than a central midfielder and a left back.
Interesting. Matthias, where do you come out on this? If you look on the squad and you put on your Sebastian Kehl mask, let's say, and go to work on the current squad, where do you think Dortmund need the most reinforcement? I do remember your Werder Bremen, or your rant after the Werder Bremen game, where Dortmund were playing a back three with all three center backs, that they were a bit available at the time, but Nico Schlotterbeck was limping toward the last minutes of the game in Wolfsburg. Waldemar Anton just returned from injury, and as Lars just outlined, Niklas Süle also not really available much this season, and when he was, I don't know if he really performed well or not. Dortmund did just equip Filippo Mane with a professional contract, but I honestly don't think we have seen much of him in... I don't even know if he has played any first team minutes at all, honestly. Also because I've not seen every game this season, but there are certainly many things Dortmund need to bolster. Would you replace Daniel Malen outright because we have very few wingers, or would it be also more in the center back, full back, central midfield positions for you?
Well, I do agree with Lars that Bensebaini and Felix Nemecha are the two bright spots, highlights of the first half of the season, or, prior to the winter break, because technically it wasn't half of the season, which still kind of irritates me. Because they've really stepped up and they were dependable and played well. Zavitsa somehow is kind of off his game compared to last season, especially the second half of last season. So maybe he'll come good in the second half of this season.
As a right winger. When Lars said that earlier, it gave me the heebie-jeebies, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I know, because that was just so bad. And Zabitza would agree with that. Pascal Gross, I think the reason why he kind of tailed off a bit is just because he was playing all the time. And he is a 33-year-old player. So when it comes to resource management, that's another thing Nuri Sahin is not that great at. Gio Reyna, I've never been his biggest fan. I think that's not exactly a secret. So, yeah, sure, fine. Keep him, get rid of him. I don't really care. I don't think it makes a difference one way or another unless you just need a body. I'd rather keep Daniel Mann, get rid of Gio Reyna than the other way around, to be perfectly honest. I do think Dortmund are a little thin at that central striker position. Guirassy, who started hot, kind of ended not a little bit. So be a little more clinical would be really, really helpful. But where I think Dortmund need strengthening, it's hard to say because Niklas Süle reports are, end of February, beginning of March is when he might come back. Well, if you bring in another central defender who would be a starter, where would you slot them in that? Süle, I guess you could put him at right back, and then you've got a little bit more coverage at your fullback positions. But I would like to see something more than Filippo Mané as being your literal backup plan, and the same with Kaba, because with a couple of exceptions over the last few years, a lot of the youth players that have come up and then played minutes for Dortmund kind of stink up the joint. And so I have no confidence until proven otherwise there. So, there are a few gaps in the lineup. I know Nuri Sahin is reported to really like a thin squad, and congratulations, you have that now. I personally would like to see a little bit more in the squad in the positions you mentioned. I think they need another central midfield player and, a defender who is versatile, whether they can actually play left back and central defender or right back and central defender. They just need a little bit more flexibility. And if getting rid of Daniel Mann may give you the flexibility financially to do that, then I'm kind of okay with that. But I also agree Maxi Bayer at right wing was not a great fit. When he played centrally, he plays much, much better. So it's a little bit difficult, especially because the January transfer window always sucks. So from that standpoint, I would prefer they just hang on to mine and then sell them at the end of the season if both parties really want a parting of the ways. But if you need the cash or you need the wage cash, you just need that room in your wage budget, fine. I think if there's an area that Dortmund could be okay with letting someone go to strengthen other areas, it's probably at the wing position.
Yeah. Well, here's my request. I need Sebastian Kehl to replicate the trick he pulled with Julian Riasson. I don't know if someone like this is available, but he also came in January of 2023, and I think his release clause was 5 million euros, and if I see it correctly, his current market value is 20 million euros. So that really ascended, and I think one of the better transfers. Really looking back at it, I think we are all in agreement that overall Borussia Dortmund should probably have a more capable right back than Julian Riasson. That being said, they have not managed to find one, and Julian Riasson, while maybe not the most gifted footballer, has still managed to play very consistent and very solid, and as Lars mentioned, his fighting spirit. So there are a lot of intangibles with Julian Riosson that he brings to the table, and I feel like if there's another fullback somewhere to snap up, then that should something Dortmund absolutely need to look into. I feel like just for the sake of depth, someone that you, I don't know, find for 5, 6, 7 million euros somewhere, some bolstering. Obviously, if you have a defender that can play fullback and center back and maybe little central midfield, that would also help. It just goes to show, I feel like, how much tweaking this squad really needs to compete, and I'm really intrigued to see how Dortmund are going to handle yet another onslaught of Englische Wochen, as we say, and in the Champions League, because that is going to continue for sure. Because I also believe that they are probably going to finish in the top 8 of the first Champions League phase, and so we'll probably have another 4 games in total in the Champions League if they make the run of 16. I don't know if they're going to then continue from that. Who knows? But either way, I think considering the amount of games, also the Club World Cup in June, it's really a thin squad. And so I'm not even sure if Nuri Sahin likes a squad this thin. But yeah, my hope overall is also that some players just simply play better as they have in the first half of the season. I think mostly I want more scoring output from Julian Brandt. I think he has 2 goals or so to his name, right, in the Bundesliga at least. That's certainly not good enough for someone that is now dubbed as the face of the club, or one of the faces of the club, from the higher ups. I think the expectation just needs to be a little bit higher for him to add more in terms of goal production. And I also really hope that Gregor Kobel will have a better second half of the season. On the line, he was okay, but I feel like his heights as a goalkeeper have been higher before, and obviously since Nuri Sahin puts a bit more of an emphasis of the build-up from out the back, he has brought a lot of danger to Dortmund with wayward passes and whatnot. Sometimes I feel a little bit more in safer hands with Alex Meyer when it comes to the build-up, simply because he's a better footballer. So I really hope that Gregor Kobel can improve in that regard as well. And other than that, I hope we have a few more fun games, because there were some victories among all the home games that Dortmund won that were also really, really, I don't know, just tedious. Like the 2-1 win against St. Pauli, not very enjoyable. I think the 4-0 win against Freiburg was super enjoyable. I really enjoyed the 2-1 win against Leipzig. But other than that, I don't recall too many highlight games and highlight wins, really. I think 7-1 against Celtic was fun, but even that didn't really got you from the edge of the seat. And other than that, although Dortmund didn't manage to concede in 3 out of their 4 wins in the Champions League, I don't know. It's just so far not a very memorable season, and I hope there will be some better memories coming out of that. The Leverkusen game on Friday is a very good chance for that. Lars, do you know what Dortmund players are currently available / who is still on a sick bay and who is going to be unavailable for Friday's game?
Not really. I think Sabitzer is the biggest question mark so far, because he wasn't available end of last week, start of this week. With this being a Friday evening game, that kind of puts him on the back burner a bit.
Would Sabitzer be on your team sheet anyway right now?
No. I don't think he would. I mean, depends a little bit. Are they selling him out before the game? Are they keeping him out of the game because, we don't want him to get injured and squander 20 odd million? That's something to be considered, but I think given that Leverkusen next to Bayern is arguably the hardest game of the season. I don't think you can have any gamesmanship. I think you need to put the best team forward, and obviously that might contain Sabitzer because of a tactical plan or whatever, because you want to flood the midfield with runners, and maybe that would be a consideration. But if it's just who are your best 11 players at this point, I think there's very little in Sabitzer's performances this season so far to suggest he's one of them. Because even on top of having to play on the right wing and looking a bit sluggish sometimes, I feel like, I don't know if he needed more of a break during the summer when he was with Austria at the Euros after the long Champions League run or whatever. On top of everything, I'm sick of Sabitzer's poor finishing this season, because I'm pretty sure Dortmund should have 4 points more just by goals Sabitzer should have scored against Gladbach and Bayern, because those would have put the games away, more or less. So yeah, I don't think he would be in my starting 11, and I'm not entirely sure who else is unavailable outside of Süle, but it seems like they are not starting the year with an injury crisis. That's reserved for later.
I love how we're all in agreement this is definitely going to happen because it's just going to be. Yeah, Matthias, I'm currently on Transfermarkt.de actually and looking at projected lineups, and Dortmund have a projected lineup in a 4-3-3 setup with Kobel in goal, and Ben Sabaini, Schlotterbeck, Anton, and Koto in the backline, and I match the holding six, if you will, and your central midfield. Interestingly, I wonder if you would agree with that, consists of Julian Brandt and Gio Reyna, and then on the wings you have Gittens and Adeyemi, and then up front Girassi. Is this a starting 11 you would put out as well, or would you see Maxi Bayer, for example, somewhere in between, or maybe, well, Sabitzer not, because we just determined he's out, but is this sort of a starting 11 that you could see beat Bayer Leverkusen?
No. I don't think Dortmund can field a team that's going to beat Bayer Leverkusen.
Interesting.
Perfectly. I mean, I don't think they're going to win. I think Bayer Leverkusen are, quality of players, maybe not worlds ahead of Dortmund, but, you can't deny the fact that the coach is gazillion times better. Could Dortmund luck their way into a win? Sure. Are they going to go out and dominate and play? I just don't see it. I absolutely don't. I don't think Dortmund are going to win. And if Dortmund get a draw, I would consider them very, very happy to do so. Just because Xabi Alonso is a Champions League caliber coach, and Nuri Sahin is not a Bundesliga level coach. And I think that makes all the world difference. I almost don't care who they put in the lineup. I think that lineup is fine. I think there are gaps and problems in it. I don't know if I would necessarily go with a 4-3-3, but it depends on what you want. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know what Nuri Sahin wants, and I don't think Dortmund have a chance.
All right, on that positive note. But no, serious question to both of you. Since you just talked about the large discrepancy in quality on the benches, if you will, do you both think that Nuri Sahin will survive until next season, or do you think he will be sacked before or at the end of the season? Lars.
I think he's going to be the one to break the trend, because Dortmund wants him to be the one to break the trend, and he's going to get a second season regardless of, within reason, regardless of, finishing the season. If they drop to 13th and are in a relegation battle, then that's probably different from narrowly missing out on Champions League or whatever.
And Matthias, do you think he's going to make the summer and beyond?
I think Unfortunately, I think he's going to make the summer because if you're going to make a change, it would have been intelligent to make the change now. After the last match day, they didn't do that. I think the problem is also if they get rid of him before the end of the season, it's admitting that they massively screwed up, which I think they did. As far as beyond the season, it'll depend on how they luck into the end of the season. I think you can sense my frustration that this is even a discussion at this point, because in my opinion, he shouldn't be Dortmund's coach at the beginning of the season. I don't think he should be Dortmund's coach on Friday at this point anymore. So really I think they're going to hang on to him unless it's just, the bottom completely falls out and a month from now they're sitting in 10th or 11th place. And then it's really just the pressure's so high that they have to make a change. But I think at that point, I don't even know who they're going to make a change to. I hear Mourinho's available. And so, it really comes down to how they finish the season. Like I said, I think Dortmund could finish in the top 4. It's absolutely conceivable. I think they're going to need a lot of luck to go that way because there was that little blip prior to the winter break where Dortmund seemed to have figured it out and been a little bit of an ascendancy, and then they proceeded to
draw to Hoffenheim and Gladbach.
Yeah, things like that. And that's where I lost. I was like, no, I am right. I'm sticking to my guns. Nuri Sahin is not a quality level coach yet. He might be at some point, but he's not there yet. Dortmund need a high quality level coach. They don't have it. I would not like to see him on the bench after the summer. Obviously I could be made to eat my words, which I will gladly do. If I am totally wrong, I will be one of the happiest people. But I don't think I am. So I think Dortmund's going to look for a new coach at the end of the season, but I think he's going to stick around.
Yeah, what I'm really intrigued to really judge how good or bad this hire was in hindsight. I really want to know where Nuri Sahin is in like 5 years. Like if he's coaching back somewhere at Antalyaspor or so, then I think it's safe to say that this was an absolute dud. But if he somehow manages to establish himself as a good Bundesliga coach or ends up somewhere in the Premier League, that too would be very intriguing. But I'm more where you guys are right now. I think this whole thing for him came far too soon, and I wish that a club of Dortmund's ambition would also choose a different route. But yeah, it obviously still has a chance of working out. But I honestly think this is like from the 100% that we have, I think it's a 5% chance that Nuri Sahin and Borussia Dortmund will be a long-term success. I honestly don't see it right now. But like you said, Matthias, I would hope to be wrong or would like to be wrong as well on that one. But yeah, I'm just not feeling it. But in general, I'm not feeling it as far as Borussia Dortmund go right now. I don't agree with Sebastian Kehl being the sporting director either. Quite frankly, I don't think he has proven to be good enough at that, and that we're sitting here again talking about whether Dortmund will eke into the top 4 or not is just not good enough. Lars said right at the outset, given the financial capabilities of this team, we are vastly underperforming, and Borussia Dortmund should always be somewhere in contention or in the title race. Even if they're like, say, 6 or 7 points off, at least it should feel like they have a chance and have a culture and philosophy that should give them a chance. But we're a far cry away from that. And that really is currently my biggest gripe, that Dortmund are such underperformers that I don't even dare to think when the next time is that Dortmund will be in the title race on merit. Obviously, they lost the title on a few seasons ago in a game that never happened. But even then, it would have been more of a fluke than an outright deserved championship where you really ascend to becoming the best team in Germany. Now, all championships count the same, but nevertheless, I'm not seeing a development in the right direction at all. So, yeah, I'm also not really hopeful that they draw the right learnings from the first half of the season to apply them to this transfer window to make some necessary changes. But we'll be definitely back to discuss those and how the game against Leverkusen went next week. I want to thank you two for coming on and kick the second half or second year of this season off. And everyone out there, I hope you had a great Christmas or whatever you celebrate. And Happy New Year. Until next time, goodbye.